4 years ago I found a very nice, but at the time 13 years old T60 and decided to do a fun project. I upgraded the CPU to the fastest it would take, the 64-bit T7600. I also replaced the hard drive with an SSD and then ran this machine as my daily driver with Windows 10. The plan was to see if I would cope for a week, but I ended up using it as my main laptop for a month without any issues. I later also upgraded the panel and the GPU, so this T60 now actually has the same specs as a T60p, the correct badge included. My only concern with this IBM is that it sometimes lags when I load a graphics-heavy web page. It's a tiny lag, but it's still annoying. So in this video we are going to upgrade and overclock the CPU and flash it with a hacked BIOS to be able to install a more modern Wi-Fi card. We are also going to install a less bloated version of Windows. The plan for this project is to see if I can use this now 17 years old IBM as my main laptop again. This video is sponsored by PCBWay. More on this later. Thank you PCBWay for supporting this channel. Okay, let's start with some benchmarks, so we have something to compare with later on. I'm going to monitor the temperatures while we run the benchmarks. So when idle, this CPU is running at 64 degrees Celsius. This may be a bit much for this machine, but I'm gonna run Cinebench R23. Okay, benchmarks are running. This is going to take a while, so I'll skip ahead here. Okay, benchmarks are done. We're getting a measly score of 516. The temperature is maxed out at 81 degrees Celsius. If it wasn't for TP fan control, this temperature would have been a bit lower, but the machine would have been a lot noisier. So TP fan control made a great job at keeping it silent and yet reasonably cool. Okay, so now we have a score for comparison. The T60 has a whitelist, so we can't just install any old Wi-Fi card. It has to be on the list to work. So the next step is to patch the BIOS and remove that whitelist. There are at least 2 different versions of this patch, so you will need to do some research to pick the right patch for your machine. I got some help from a viewer to get the correct patch. So thanks Edward, I appreciate the help. So now we need to boot from this CD-ROM. This is easily done with the ThinkVantage blue button, F12, and then we can choose to boot from the CD-ROM drive. Starting MS-DOS 7.1, it actually lists which machines it will support. This machine is a 2007, so everything looks okay so far. So I'm just gonna hit yes, and it starts to flash the BIOS. Apparently it's a Phoenix BIOS. Okay, I skipped ahead a bit. It finished patching and made a very loud beep. Flash memory has been successfully programmed. Press any key to restart. The machine turned itself off, so it didn't actually restart. Let's turn it on again. Fingers crossed. You never know with BIOS patches. Well, we've got the splash screen. It's taking longer than it normally does. Okay, it took about 30 seconds, and then it gave me an error that I wasn't quick enough to read. But you'll probably see it on camera. So let's just check time and date. Yeah, that's about right. I forgot to check which revision of the BIOS I had before the patch. Down here we can see that we have a T7600 running at 2.33 GHz, and we've got 3 gigs installed. So I'm just gonna save and quit. I think it does something every time it posts, because the splash screen takes slightly longer than it did before. At least I think it does, and I have no way of going back to check. We're back in Windows, so I think we flashed the BIOS without any issues. So I think we're ready to take the machine apart. Some of these screws are marked. This screw, for instance, will remove the palm rest. The keyboard will give you access to the RAM. So why would you want to do this in the first place? Well, the T60 was partially designed by IBM. So this is arguably the last IBM laptop. I know some people don't agree, because it was finished by Lenovo, and it's way more useful than the T43 that was completely designed by IBM. The only thing I don't like about the T60 is that the multi-bay doesn't take a regular diskette drive. You have to go all the way back to the T30. to get a ThinkPad with a built-in diskette drive. Now this is going to be hard to see on camera, but we need to disconnect this flat flex here to the mouse pad to remove the palm rests. I read somewhere that the T60 can actually use 3.25 gigs of RAM. So I'm going to replace one of these modules and install 4 gigs. And if that information is correct, we will increase RAM from 3 gigs to 3.25. That may not sound like much, but I want to get as much as possible out of this IBM. Same thing with the keyboard. It has a flat flex that needs to be disconnected from the motherboard. And here's the Wi-Fi card that is giving me so much trouble. I have also installed a Bluetooth module in this machine, but I don't think I got it to work in Windows 10, and I ended up not really needing it, so I just ignored it. It's been a couple of years since I disassembled one of these, but they are easy enough, so I think I will remember. I use 3.5-inch diskettes pretty much every week for my projects. So unfortunately I go for my compact laptops quite often, and apparently this old battery from 2007 still has an hour and a half in it, at least last time I checked. To remove the keyboard bezel, we need to remove this screw here inside one of the rubber feet and the outermost screw on the other side. And here's the only tricky bit when disassembling a T60. And it's the keyboard bezel. I have checked the instructions. Oh, I think we're in luck. It's coming off quite easily, at least on one side. Yeah, the other side too. Wow, that was lucky. I think it took me about 10 minutes the last time I tried. Well, I actually had to check, but none of the tabs are broken. So not sure why it came off so easily this time. Next up we need to remove the fan assembly to get access to that CPU. So we've got this bracket here, pushing on the GPU, and then a couple of screws over the CPU. So when I found this machine years ago, it didn't have any dust inside. So it may have been a spare machine. Well, it's actually still surprisingly clean. So maybe I haven't used it enough. Let's clean this mess up before we remove that CPU. Otherwise I'm gonna get all messy. It's installed in a ZIF socket. So all we need to do is to turn the screw here, and it should now be free to come out. This little chip here has done a pretty good job for a couple of years, and I don't think I'm going to retire it quite yet. I think I'm going to install it in another T60 and mess around with Linux. And here's the star of the show in this video. Before we continue, I'd like to say thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. I have been using their PCBs for years now. This is just a few of the projects we have built on this channel. So head over to PCBWay.com and order some PCBs for your next project. Thank you PCBWay for supporting this channel. This is the T7600G. It's identical to the regular T7600, but it has an unlocked clock multiplier, specifically designed and only used in the Dell XPS M1710. So with this chip here, we can mess around with the clock multiplier and see if we can make this T60 go any faster. I'm gonna check all the pins off camera before I install it. Yep, all the pins look fine. So let's drop it down the socket and lock. I really missed the days of when CPUs were installed in sockets in laptops. It was so easy to upgrade. Back in the day I upgraded my compact laptop from 700 MHz to 1 GHz, just as easily as we're doing now. I just realized this machine has a second PCI Express mini slot here, so perhaps we could install a Wi-Fi card here instead of in this slot here. I need to check. I had completely forgotten about this. And here's our new Wi-Fi card. But as you can see, it won't fit in this machine, because this is an M2 card. I will include the model number on the screen here somewhere. So to make this work, I picked up this adapter kit here. This one is used to take an M2 card and install in a mini PCI slot. It came in this kit here with some plastic bits and a tiny screwdriver. The screw hole here is taped over, probably to be used with a longer card. I'm only guessing, but in either way we need to remove that piece of tape to be able to install our card in the adapter. I guess I'll use that tiny little included screwdriver. Yeah, that worked out quite well. Well, at least it fits. Let's hope it works too. It also includes this plastic bit here, but it doesn't say what it's for, and I don't think it will fit on this machine. So I'm gonna skip it, since I don't know if that second slot is identical. I'm gonna use this one here. By the way, by the looks of it, this adapter can be modified. So this piece here looks like it could be broken off and fit in some machines with less space. But in the T60 it fits perfectly. And now I wonder if we can use that second slot for something useful. Well, it looks like it fits perfectly. Next we can attach the cables to the Wi-Fi card. Oh, hang on a minute. They are not identical to the original connectors. Yeah, these guys are smaller. Oh no, that sucks. I didn't consider this. Well, I can clearly see that the footprint is quite different. But let's remove them and see what can be done. There are a couple of small components here that I am a bit worried that we will blow off the board. So I'm gonna go with a really low airflow and hope for the best. I didn't consider at all that they might have changed the standard for these connectors. But then again, it's been 17 years, so I guess things change. I almost blew it away. It's so tiny. Yeah, now that I see them up close, these new connectors are quite a bit smaller. I have set the airflow as low as 40, but that's still enough to blow one of these off the bench. Oh, here it comes. Wow, that thing is absolutely tiny. I think it's about 1 millimeter wide. Underneath the connector, there's one pad on this side here, connecting to the pin inside the connector. And then it has one pad on each side, connected to this large part here. It doesn't have to fit perfectly, so if I can solder this connector slightly too far in, I can just about reach this pad here for the center pole. And then I can solder one side and skip the other two pads. And if we're lucky, this might work. I'll remove the old solder with the help of some flux. This is such a tiny amount of solder. I don't think we need to use any wick. Yeah, that's probably good enough. Some more flux. I guess this is a job to do on a microscope. But let's see if we can do this without. But seriously, why did I change the standard? These large connectors are small enough. Only problem now is that we can't check if this side here is connected. Well, unless it's connected to ground. And it is. Okay, so this solder joint here is working. So how about this guy here? Yeah, that one works too. So maybe we're lucky. Keep your fingers crossed. I'll replace the other one off camera to make this a little bit easier. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite this easy. I double checked and all three of these pads are connected to ground. Same thing on this side here. So I need to solder this connector like so and solder the pad on the inside here with a tiny tip. But the problem here is, if I do, the center pin of the connector is going to short to this ground pin here. So it's a bit trickier than I first thought. And here's a possible solution. I used some Kapton tape and masked these two and these two pads off. And I'm going to try to solder the large connectors to these two pads and these two pads here. Not sure if I can get inside here with my smallest tip, but let's give this a try. Sorry, I couldn't get that on camera. I could barely do it without the large camera on top of the PCB. But I think this works. It's a bit dodgy, but if it works, it's good enough for me. So if I measure from this pad to the center pin, we've got connection. And same thing on this side. From ground to the outer ring here, we've got connection too. So not pretty, but it works. Now let's hope this card is actually compatible with the T60. Okay, the card is reinstalled in the machine. And as you can see, these cables now fit. Okay, I also replaced the RAM modules. We're ready for a test. And it's making lots of beeps. And unfortunately, nothing else. Oh crap. Something isn't quite right. Okay, I checked, and 4 beeps apparently is the RAM modules. So let's apply some deoxit on these guys. Now there's actually a hair here, so maybe that explains it. So maybe that was the issue. Let's try with one module. Okay, fingers crossed. Fan spins up. It's posting. So stupid hair in my RAM module. And it boots Windows. I'll reinstall the trackpad before we continue. Okay, trackpad installed. Let's turn the power on. I have also replaced the 1 gig module with a 2 gig module. So this machine now has 4 gigs of RAM. But unfortunately it can't use all 4 gigs. And that's a limitation of the chipset. But if what I read online is correct, maybe we can use 3.25. Okay, the BIOS can't tell the difference between the T7600 and the G version. But it did recognize 4 gigs of RAM. So I'm just going to save and exit. And jump into Windows. Okay, let's run CPU Z. And in here it's correctly identified. Intel Mobile Core 2 Duo T7600G. So we're all good. In the device manager we now have network controller, an unknown device that has not been properly installed. I'm going to connect to the internet with the cable for now. Okay, I had to reboot, but we're now online. By the way, when I did the first upgrades on this machine, this channel had 13 subscribers. So thanks everyone who has joined since then. And back in the device manager, we now only have the unknown device. And then it has an unknown USB device. Port reset failed. Let me pull that USB stick out and see if that's the issue. Yeah, now that issue went away. But we still have one unknown device. Not sure what that is, but I'll check later. Check on the network adapters. We actually have Wi-Fi here. AX210. And we now have the option of connecting to Wi-Fi. So let's give it a try. So I guess I'll unplug the Ethernet cable and go online. I'll just try something random here. Yeah, it totally works. Awesome. I just did a partial edit of the video. And with the 10x magnifications that you guys have on camera, I noticed my mistake. At least I think it's a mistake. Because on this PCB there is a large connector and a small connector on each side on the adapter. And if I'm not mistaken, those are made to convert the small connector to the large connector. So you're probably supposed to route short wires from the Wi-Fi card to these connectors here. and then connect the PC to the large connectors. At least that's what I think they're for. It doesn't actually say anywhere. I wish they would include a manual. So before you start soldering connectors, you may want to check on Google and see if you can find any information about these connectors here. Okay, next up we're going to reinstall Windows, but we're gonna go bloat-free this time. I made a bootable USB, so let's install it. I'm gonna go for a clean install and remove all the partitions. So this is Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC 2019. It's basically Windows 10 Enterprise, specifically designed for applications like robots, ATM machines, cash registers and such. The copy I bought is build 1809 and it's supported until 2029, but we'll see if this IBM will last that long. This version gets security updates, but no feature updates. But before we rush off buying a license, you are going to have to do some reading, unfortunately. I think you need to have a volume licensing agreement and buy a bunch of these to do it right, according to Microsoft. But don't take my advice on this. I haven't sold a Microsoft license in over 10 years. Also, this version of Windows doesn't support certain software and some modern hardware. I'll skip ahead here until something interesting happens. Wow, that went quick. It's already done. Now look at this magic here. No Cortana, no App Store, no games, no Edge, no nothing. Just pure Windows. This is what Windows Professional should have been, in my opinion. There's just no bloat anywhere. This version of Windows is perfect for this vintage IBM. Now, how about those drivers? Okay, we are missing a few, but let's do some updates first. Oh, I see. One of those devices was the Ethernet card, so we've got no Ethernet connection. I went ahead and downloaded the drivers for the Wi-Fi card from Intel, put them on a USB stick and installed them, so we now should have internet. Okay, so we are online now, but we don't have a browser pre-installed on this machine. So let's head over to Windows Update. And it works, we're online. So I'll go ahead and install all these updates off camera. Okay, Windows Update finished, and we now only have one unknown device in the device manager, and that is a Bluetooth module. So I guess I'll remove it since it's not working with Windows 10. Or perhaps there is a card that would work in this machine and Windows 10. I forgot to check. I ran into a small problem here. I had reassembled the machine, but it's making a noise. That is because the wires for the Wi-Fi card are touching the fan. So that means I have to install them further inside the machine. Unfortunately, that also means that this wire here is probably not going to reach the adapter. So you may have to solder that connector after all. If you have managed to install one of these cards without soldering connectors, let us all know in the comment section. Here's what it looks like under the bezel. So I'm going to have to route the cables this way, and that is going to make them shorter. And you can't route the cables over the Wi-Fi card because the keyboard sits flush on the card. I ran Cinebench and we're getting pretty much the same score. So everything is working. Now let's see if we can make this machine a little bit faster, or maybe a lot. Let's find out. So the T60 obviously doesn't support overclocking in BIOS. So we are going to use a software called Throttle Stop. I have never used this software before, but I did some reading, and I think we're supposed to click on this unlink button here. Now I think we can change the clock multiplier. Let's tick this box here. I'm partially just guessing here, but let's try this. Turn on throttle stopper to unlock. Okay. And yeah, we've got a turn on button here. Let's try it. And yes, now we can change the clock multiplier. Awesome. So the T7600G is set to 14. So let's run it with the clock multiplier set to 16. I guess we should click on save. No values previously saved. Click to save changes. Not sure what that's all about. Okay, so I guess it's overclock now. Ah, yeah, it is. It actually says 16X here. And the CPU is running at 2.66 gigahertz instead of 2.33. Okay, cool. So I guess we're overclocking. Let's run the benchmarks. And we are now at 519. These benchmarks take forever, so I'm gonna skip ahead here. And we're done. This is totally working. So we now got a score of 622 instead of 516. This is so cool. Okay, let's crank it up to 17. We are now running at 2.8 gigahertz. That is quite the overclock. I'll click save. And I get that same error. Oh no! We got a blue screen. I tried to start Cinebench and it just completely crashed. Oh crap. I wonder if this is a cooling issue, since I have upgraded the GPU in this machine. So I have ordered some Arctic TP3 for a future video. But I think we should use it in this project, and I'll just order some more. Okay, brand new thermal pads installed. Let's add some heat paste. No, that didn't help at all. As soon as I started throttle stop, the machine blue screened and crashed. Oh, that sucks. Well, the CPU got really toasty quite quickly. So this might still be a cooler issue. So let's go a bit silly and see if we can improve the cooling. I'll add some heat paste on top of the cooler. And the biggest cooler I have at hand. Well, it's blocking the view slightly. But let's see if this helps. Okay, let's start throttle stop. Well, it's set to 17 here, but it's running at 14. How about reset? Okay, now it went back to 14. Now let's crank it up to 15. Okay, so 16 and 17. Now let's run Cinebench again. Okay, fingers crossed. Yeah, I can actually feel how those heat pipes underneath this cooler are getting hot. So at least some of that heat is going up in this cooler, even though it's not screwed down to the socket. Okay, it's running. Yeah, this is working much better than I thought. This huge cooler here is actually getting hot. And after a couple of minutes, we are still at 55 degrees Celsius. Oh no, it crashed. Oh crap. So this is probably not a cooling issue. This is something else. Because this cooler here is nice and toasty. So it's definitely getting that heat off the CPU. Well, that sucks. Well, in that case, let's mess around with the voltage. It's now set to 1.22. Not sure how high we could go without burning that chip. Let's go with 1.3. That's a pretty substantial increase. Okay, 2.8 gigahertz at 1.3 volts. Let's run Cinebench again. Okay, it's running. Fingers crossed. Oh no! We got a lower score! We're down to 394. So, what the heck does this mean? Is it unstable? That cooler is pretty warm. So maybe something here is incorrectly set. If you have more experience with the software, I'd be very interested to know if my settings are correct here. But for now, let's just try something else. Let's try to run it at 3 gigahertz at 1.4 volts. But it didn't crash. So let's run Cinebench and see what happens. Maybe it's just unstable. Well, the benchmarks seems to be running at the speed too. Yes! Got a higher score! So we now reached 709. That is quite an improvement. So from 519, we're now at 709. Okay, let's see how hot it's running. Oh, that's not too bad. It's somewhere close to 50 degrees Celsius at the CPU. And the cooler itself, is about 40. So it's definitely doing its job. Okay, so let's go silly. Oh no! As soon as I set it to 20, it crashed. Well, in that case, let's go for 19 at 3.1 gigahertz. Okay, Cinebench is running, fingers crossed. It's kind of strange that it got unstable at 2.8, but it ran fine at 3 gigahertz. So, not sure what to expect of 3.1. I guess we're about to find out. Oh no, it crashed! It almost finished the benchmarks, but unfortunately it crashed. But hey, 3 gigahertz! That is not a bad overclock. So apparently the good old T60 is a real overclocker, from 2.3 to 3 gigahertz. That is a significant improvement. So I guess the next step in this project is to find a more elegant solution for the cooling. Leave your thoughts down below. What do you guys think is worth trying out next? I'll make another video and we'll try again. When it's done, I'll put a link on the screen shortly. If you're watching this fresh, hit the bell icon below and set it to all. Meanwhile, check out this video. I would end by saying thank you to my patrons. I appreciate your support. If you want to support me too, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get ad-free early access. If you like this video, let me know with a thumbs up and a comment. If you're a regular viewer, consider subscribing to this channel. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next week.